Hey traders, welcome to another crypto market update. In this video, we're just going to be looking at the charts on TradingView. First, looking at the large term time frame on BTC, and then moving to the smaller time frame. And then we'll go over some charts and then actually compare different alts with Bitcoin to kind of see relative strength within the different altcoins that we're going to be looking at today, which is Ethereum, Link, BNB, and Ripple. So let's first start off with the weekly chart, because obviously looking at the top-down approach of price action is a very good way to approach the market. So first things first, let's look at the weekly chart. We did talk about this briefly in the last crypto market update, but let's just talk about what happened since then. We did see more bullish volume come in after our long wick to the upside, indicating that there is sell pressure, keeping the pressure of supply within the market there. We are looking like we are testing this let's say $900 resistance really well. Overall, it does look like it is being resisted, with sell pressure around this key level of resistance, and the discussion between risk reward either to the upside or to the downside. The risk reward, in my personal view, is still looking more favorable to the downside until we do break this major level of resistance. Until that happens, I think the risk reward is better situated to the downside if we are swing trading, which I personally am swing trading in the crypto market. So in my personal view, the higher probability setup is going to be a short to the downside, because even if we do fall to the major level of ascending support, that's a significant move of over 30%. And if we do fall to that zone, that's still within our large macro price action pattern that is still extremely bullish. So we take a step back and actually assess the potential for a move to the downside. It doesn't seem that far off to have a wick maybe touch down to the $6,500 level, maybe even with a wick down to sub 6K. But at the end of the day, I do think that that's still a possibility that we could have, especially with the mining capitulation that could still emerge post-halving, which we've been talking about for a little while here. So that's the thesis for our view going forward. Doesn't mean that it'll actually go down all the way, but I do think that the higher probability is for a possible short entry to the downside. And if we do get the price to hold key levels of support and we don't really get any sort of sell pressure, then if we consolidate a little bit more, we will be looking to potentially get into the market after we do break this key level of resistance, and we'd have to change our bias. But until that moment occurs, we're kind of in a neutral zone where we don't want to be too bullish just yet, because in my personal view, I think we could consolidate a little bit more if we do have any sort of major sell-off like we had in March, where there is liquidity event occurring, where basically assets across the entire board is selling off. I'm pretty sure that there's a high probability chance that Bitcoin will see another sell-off as well. Always a reminder, Bitcoin is still a speculative asset that is extremely liquid. So if anyone is looking to increase their cash pile for a rainy day, if they are getting margin called, if they need more money for anything, for rent, for food, more for mortgage payments, because they lost their job, it's still a difficult time within the economy. Bitcoin is still a very liquid asset that you can sell and turn into cash extremely quickly compared to mortgages or bullion or a car. Bitcoin is a asset that you can exchange for currency very quickly, which then would be a possible reason why, if there is some momentum to the downside, we could see another liquidity event yet again, compared to, let's say, for example, things that are a little bit harder to sell. It takes a longer time for that bearish move to occur, for example, in real estate. But in crypto, you can get an extremely quick volatile fall. So we got to be aware of a possibility of another somewhat of a capitulation event occurring, maybe not as aggressive as this, maybe it's more aggressive, but at the end of the day, we do have to keep in mind that this could be a possibility, in the upcoming future here. Always got to remember that Bitcoin is a speculative asset. We haven't really seen it. Actually, we've seen it do pretty well in terms of COVID and other assets, but in terms of if there is an inflationary worry, how confident are global investors going to be for this asset? It is the big question of, I think, the next couple of years. So moving on to the more global macro, into the smaller time frames, let's now look at the daily chart. And let's just take some of these. Oops. Let's just go back. I think I screwed that up here. Let's just go to this chart because I don't really know exactly what happened to that chart. I think I changed the ticker. But anyways, let's go to the Bitfinex chart here. This is the 6 hour. Let's just go to the 12 hour to get a good understanding of what we currently are seeing within the market. So in my personal view, if we are going to be looking for some sell pressure, I think we could see this zone act as a major level of supply, and then we're looking for some level of weakness within the bulls and some strength within the sellers. And what do we see here? Well, initially in this structure, we don't get a blow off top within our ascending zone compared to what we see right here, where we saw this resistance get halted many times, but then you get a blow off top where now your previous resistance is turning into a new level of support. So that's a blow off top, which is kind of that last push from the buyers to get that last oomph out of the way. And then we get 1, 2, 3 major levels of resistance to keep that price below our major level of supply. And that's currently what we see is this descending zone that is keeping the price making lower highs. So we know that there's a lot of sell pressure within this zone. So now we're getting a squeeze from the buyers, keeping the price from making making higher lows. This is a low, higher low, higher low, higher low. So we're making higher lows, pushing up towards a major level of supply. So obviously when we have two options to go, we're either going to go up or we're going to bounce off and come back down. And we talked about the room that the price has before we get to our major level of demand. Let's just make this white so it's a little bit easier to see. So we know that there's a lot of room before we get to our major level of demand, which is around, let's say, 6K. But before that, we do have a mid-range zone at around 7,700, which is also a key structural zone that we do need to consider. But before obviously hitting that, I do think that we could be looking for a possible entry for a short before we actually get down all the way to here. But we're looking for some structural zone where we're seeing a series of lower lows, lower highs, breaking supports, holding resistances, and we want to see the price, in my personal view, break both of these ascending support zones. And if that's the case, then we can see that not the first support, but the last lower end of the support is also broken, really showing the weakness within the buyers. If the buyers were able to gain confidence and keep the momentum, we could possibly see this level of support hold and then this ascending level of support. So there's a lot of potential demand near this zone right around here. And if we break it, kind of like we saw here, there was also a squeeze within the previous structural reversal that we saw right around here, where we saw an uptrend, obviously after the reverse head and shoulders, and then we got a consolidation zone. And then once the momentum started to turn to the downside, the sellers definitely gained confidence, the buyers got worried, fear set into the market, and then we got our massive liquidity event, which was a global event. It wasn't just related to do with BTC or cryptos altogether. It was a global event across all asset classes. But just because, you know, that happened and it's not really happened in the past doesn't mean it can't happen in the future, especially with so much uncertainty within the market. So in my personal view, that's going to be the main zone that we are looking to hold below. If we do break above that zone, that means that this major symmetrical triangle on the weekly has broken to the upside. We will want to make sure that we are not entering on any wicks here. If we're looking at smaller time frames, 15-minute, 1-hour time frames, we don't want to be entering just on a wick. So we want to make sure that it is breaking and holding above that zone and making sure that buyers are not only pushing the price higher, but also keeping it there, which is very important. So waiting until a larger time frame candle has closed may not necessarily be a bad thing, because it provides a little bit more of a structure to your entry instead of just FOMOing in whenever you see that candle increase up. So that's a little bit of my 2 cents. Let's go to the smaller time frames. I don't really have a whole lot more to talk about on the 12-hour or the 6-hour. The main thing that we want to be looking for is two zones in my personal belief. The first zone, which is going to be our new level of resistance, is around 9,300. So let's talk about it in a little bit more of a greater detail on the smaller time frames here, or at least just zooming right in. The first major zone is around 9,300, which is right here. That's going to be my new level of resistance. It does look like we're going to pass this ascending zone, and if it doesn't, that's totally fine. But this $9,300 zone is going to be the key structural resistance that I want to see the price hold. If we're able to hold that zone, that's great. We could get something like this, where that was a structural zone in the previous reversal. We did get a poke above, but we got a slam right back down. And if we zoom out to the daily, that is just a wick, where you just get a wick to the upside, and then the candle closure is actually right down here. So that's definitely indicating some sell pressure within the market, and I wouldn't mind if we do get something like that on the $9,300 zone. That's going to be the major key level of supply that I do want to see the price hold. If it goes above that zone, then we're playing with fire for any shorts, because we're so close to the breakout zone and we're able to hold this ascending zone. It's squeezing closer and closer. You could get the last little pop here, and I do not want to be short if that is the case. I want to have more dependency and more of the probability to be short bias and to make money short, obviously. So that $9,300 zone is the key level that I want to see the price stick under if we're looking to gain any exposure to the downside. Now, the final zone that I'm looking for buyers, and if we break this zone, I'm definitely looking to add to my short position. If I am looking to short, if it breaks and holds below the zone, is the $8,500 zone. So 8,500 and 93 are the two major zones that I'm looking at for key structural either failures or holding of resistances. So that's my first zone, the $9,300 zone. I want that to hold as a resistance. And then my major midpoint that I'm going to classify as a key breakout, if it does break below, is 8,500. If we break below 8,500, I think we could definitely see 77 and even further. Last time we did have a sharp drop off. We can see, let's just take everything off. The last time we had a major sharp drop off, the $8,500 zone was a significant support that was able to hold. And I'm talking about right here. Initially, we hit that top very, very quickly, and then we had a sharp drop off. But we saw that the price was able to hold this key level of demand. That definitely tells you that there is demand near that area. You see lots of wicks around this zone where the price came down, but it got picked right back up and it consolidated, and then it made a move back to the upside. So we know that around this $8,500 zone is a lot of confidence built up from the bulls. And if we break it, I think confidence will be lost, and sellers could be starting to take some confidence away from the bulls and then try to push that price back down. So that's the overall setup that I currently see within the structure. I think a previous structure that was somewhat similar was back in, let's say, August of 2019. We had that structural triangle we had breaking the around 9K zone, and then that was the main support of this triangle. And it kind of looks something like this. Let's get our squeeze here. So this is also a triangle similar to what we are currently seeing on a large time frame. Something like that. It's not going to be perfect, but you see a squeeze coming with a series of lower highs and higher lows. So you know that there's a squeeze, and there's an apex somewhere here because it slowly goes to an endpoint. But what you're seeing is the price bouncing from resistance to support. So you're now at a resistance. You know that there's going to be a probability that there's sellers in the market. So what do? You look for weakness within structure. First thing, you look for a potential ascending zone that's going to be creating the outside of the trend, which is going to be connecting the higher lows right here. So you see 3 connection points of the higher lows with an anchor point right at that zone at the bottom there. You initially see it hold, and then if you can see it very clearly, it actually breaks and retests this zone pretty perfectly. So that's going to be the first validation that there's weakness within the bulls, is a break in the longer term ascending trend line. You see a break down below, retest, and then you see a bearish engulfing candle significantly push it down below a major level of support, which is right around here. So now you are able to break the ascending zone as well as break the market structure, which is going to be that significant support that we have right here. Once we've broken our ascending zone and support, we're now at a point where the confidence is lost from the ascending zone and from a major level of support. So in my opinion, that's two indications that the buyers are not able to hold the price up, and we know that there is sell pressure near the high there. So that's, in my opinion, a really good indication that we could see some sell pressure. That's going to be the highest probability area where sellers are going to try to take control of the market. So that's kind of an example that we saw back in August of 2019. And then here's a similar sort of structure where you break an ascending zone, which is this zone right here. Obviously, this didn't have a blow off top compared to one we had a blow off top like this, and we go back into that wedge. But in this structure, we did not get a blow off top. We were able to hold that resistance all the way through. But once we are able to break it, we test for a nice new level of resistance and hold that key level of supply. That's really good to see for a reversal pattern. And then you see a series of lower highs, creating a triangle, and then once you get that momentum to start on that major level of support breaking, that is when you're looking for continuation patterns to go to the downside. So that's my personal view on the price action, and what we're currently seeing within the current price action is we are breaking ascending zones. We haven't really fully broken a major zone. I think $8,500 is going to be similar to the $9,200 zone back in the previous reversal, and then the 93 would be somewhat similar to the $9,700 zone in the previous reversal as well. So that's going to be the structure. I don't think it's just ready yet, but it does look like it is weakening. It does look like it is curving back to the downside. So that's going to be my view of the Bitcoin market. Now we're going to look at an inverse chart of Bitcoin. So up is down, down is up, and this is the chart right here. So this is going to be the further down you go, the higher the price of Bitcoin is. So let's just quickly look at the daily chart, because obviously it is going to take a little bit of getting used to understand what is happening. So let's even go to the 2-day to get a good understanding. So this is a long-term time frame. This is that symmetrical triangle that we're talking about on the weekly chart, except this is completely flipped. So we are now at a key level of support on this chart. Although if we really zoom out, obviously this chart is extremely bearish because we had a massive sell-off. We're now holding a series of higher lows that is still making lower highs and is a continuation macro triangle still to the downside. So in my personal view, it's a great setup for a short. Obviously, it'd be super bullish for BTC, but let's actually talk about the small term time frames, because that's what matters in making money for swing trades. So we know that we're hitting this ascending support really well. 1, 2, 3. We know that we're respecting this zone extremely well, and we are basically right at this low here, this higher low. We're still making higher lows, so it still looks bullish on the short term. We did create a nice, let's just go like here, a double bottom right here, and we got our first initial push, which had a lot of buy pressure coming into the market, and then we got a move back down with not much sell pressure, and now it looks like we're getting the momentum to start that next push to the upside. It's just a matter of if we're going to get something like this. If we go and put back on the TA, we can see, let's just take a picture here and just discuss what we're currently seeing in the market. So we know that there's a lot of buy pressure within this support zone, a ton of buy pressure, and we're seeing these squeezes where we get a funnel or wedge of some sort, and we're getting a funnel where there's sell pressure coming into the market, and we know there's a lot of demand here. So it's a squeeze, right? And someone has to win. In this case, the buyers won. The buyers were able to hold this key zone, push the price up, and then we start a series of higher lows and higher highs. Huge move to the upside, nice consolidation, and then you get a massive pump. Very similar structure to what we're seeing right now in terms of the squeeze, in terms of the holding of support. So that's why I'm a little bit skeptical that we are going to have a move to the upside. I think the higher probability is a move back to the downside, where we're going to have a higher probability of a solid risk reward on the short side compared to the long side. So again, we see this nice wedge formation here, here, and here. So the squeeze, the funnel is coming to this major level of support. And the question is it going to hold? Is this support zone going to hold? And if it is, we might see something where we're going to get a quick aggressive push back to the upside on this inverse chart. We're looking for ideally something like this, a continuation pattern where you get a solid move to the upside, showing that there's a lot of pressure in the market to push the price up, on this chart, which would be bearish pressure on the actual Bitcoin chart. But on this chart, it'd be bullish pressure pushing the price up. And then we're looking for a consolidation where we see a series of lower lows and lower highs, squeezing the price in a tight consolidation. And once you see that expansion and volatility again, you're looking to gain an entry before the huge next markup phase occurs. So that's going to be the structure that we're looking for. But at this current moment in time, I think we are in this around phase where we are testing if we're able to break out of the squeeze to the downside before we make our move to back to the upside here. So that's my thesis, and that's what I'm going to be waiting for. I think it's still a little bit early. If we go down to the smaller time frames, I will look at some opportunities that we could be looking for some entries, but at the end of the day, I still think it's a little bit early for shorts. I think that reversal pattern is still too early to say it has been validated and we could be looking for shorts. But at the end of the day, I definitely think that we could be looking for another short play because the risk reward on shorts is better than a risk reward on a long for Bitcoin as of right now for the type of time horizon that I am trading in. And for me at least, everyone's different. If you're trading on a 1 year or 5 year time horizon, obviously the risk reward is way more skewed for the long side. I would never want to short Bitcoin on a 2 year time horizon. I think it's absolutely stupid. But for the short term swing trades that we're looking for, I think the higher probability is to the downside. So where are we looking for initial opportunities here? Let's zoom in from the, I believe, 6 hour into the 4 hour time frame. So let's zoom in a little bit and then just discuss what we currently see and where we could see the price bounce for a potential entry. So we know that this $9,300 zone is a very significant zone within the price action. Key level of support, new level of resistance, well respected all around. So we know that this key zone is a very structural resistance that was able to hold the price in our nice consolidation, keeping the price in a nice little rectangular zone, creating our base. That's very necessary for any real reversal, in my personal belief, in order for us to have a nice valid zone where we have a foundation that we can work with. And this, in my opinion, is the nice foundation. This key level of support is a nice foundation. And then we have the floor to the foundation. That's the way I'm viewing the market right now. I don't want to be entering within this foundation at all. This is a no trade zone in my view. This is just an area where we've built a solid level of confidence from the sellers, in my personal view. So now what are we looking at? This is now the foundation. So what are we looking for? We just broke out of the foundation and we're looking to retest this major level of support yet again as a new level of support at the top of this zone. So what are we going to be looking for in short? I think if we are able to get a nice pullback to around this $9,300 zone, it would be a really good opportunity. We could even see a potential ascending zone connect the higher lows somewhere around here. That would be, in my opinion, a decent entry for a possible short if we get some level of a squeeze where we're able to hold this previous level of resistance and support for a new level of support yet again. That, in my opinion, would be a really good opportunity for us to enter into a potential trade. You don't want to have random entries. You want to see a squeeze. You want to see some level of consolidation, something where you're getting a squeeze, something like this. And once you're able to get that nice pop, you're going to get that momentum to come into the market. But in my opinion, you're getting a lot of pressure from the sell side to keep I guess the squeeze to the downside. So there's a lot of momentum kind of going down, and the buyers are still able to hold the price within this zone because this is our foundation. So my personal view, foundation has been made. We're just looking for a nice retest for a potential level of a new support at around 9,300, and that would be a really good entry for a potential feeler trade. And then if you're really looking for the major structure to change, I would be looking for around the $8,500 zone, because we can see if we take a step back, that this is a key level of resistance. Look at how many wicks are here. A lot of wicks, lots of pressure to the downside, signaling that there is significant sell pressure to push the price and keep it below this $8,500 zone. So if we are able to break this zone, not only have we kind of broken the last of the descending zones, which is providing sell pressure within the market, alleviating any real sell pressure left, so then that would create a good solid move to the upside. So there's a lot of sell pressure we can see right here. It might look a little bit messy, but hopefully you can understand the sellers in the market that is driving the price further and further to the downside, which would be on the flip side, buyers pushing the price higher and higher to the upside. I think once we get some momentum to crush the buyers, I think around 85 would be the final zone. And if we go above this zone, I think we're going to get a pretty significant move to the upside, which would mean that would be a move back to the downside on the normal chart of Bitcoin. So yeah, my personal belief, higher probability of moving to the upside than to the downside. And then if we're able to somewhat create a consolidation where we get, you know, if we do get a sell move to the downside, I'd like to see some consolidation that is able to provide me a level of a higher lows, so then we get a move back to the downside, and then we're looking like we could see a huge move back up. That's my personal view. And why do I want to see one more move to the downside, one more significant move to the downside before we have our major bullish liftoff? Let's just go to the weekly because it would be easier to understand. So we talked about this before. Why do we want to see a sell-off before we see the moon phase, like a lot of people are thinking, where you're going to get that massive push to the upside? The reason is because the mining network has not seen a decrease in the difficulty enough to kind of cull the inefficient miners. So if you don't know anything about the network, there are miners who mine or Bitcoin, or if you're in proof of work, you have to mine BTC in order to basically validate the network and also create new coins. If there's more miners coming into the network, the harder it is to actually mine Bitcoin, which means that it costs more. Whenever you hear of difficulty increasing, it just means that it costs more energy to mine one Bitcoin. And right now, we haven't really seen the difficulty go down, which means that if the price remains stagnant and if the difficulty keeps on increasing, revenues are not increasing. Revenues are stagnant while the expenses are increasing. So there is a squeeze. This is your revenue. This is your expenses. If it continues, there's a squeeze, right? There's a point in which you start losing money to make one Bitcoin. So that's the fundamental structure of the miner capitulation, and we haven't really seen that capitulation yet. This was initially a capitulation. This was a really small one, but because we recovered so quickly, a lot of the inefficient miners were able to turn off their monitors and then turn them right back on when the price of Bitcoin started to go back up above the break-even price. And then we saw a substantial increase in the difficulty once we saw the break above $77-ish $100. So what we're looking for is a break and a low and some level of a base to form. So then we're able to kind of create a environment in which the sell pressure is limited due to the new minted Bitcoin that is created is flowing and funneling into miners who are not going to sell because of the efficiencies that they've been able to create from, let's say, partnerships from energy funds or subsidiaries of like governments or something like that. Something along the lines of them able to use energy very cheaply. I don't think we had that yet. I think there's still inefficient miners that need to be taken out of the network in order for this massive bull run to commence, because you need to have a lack of supply, right? Simple economics, you need to have a lack of supply and the same amount or more demand in order to get these massive moves to the upside. So that's my personal view. I think in the large term time frame, talking about kind of the summer and fall, I don't think we're ready for that massive move to the upside yet. But hey, it could come if the price of Bitcoin continues to appreciate. The minor capitulation doesn't need to happen, because if the price of Bitcoin is continuing to go up, there's no squeeze because profits are still growing. It's when we have the price of Bitcoin stagnate, go sideways, or go down when the difficulty and the hash rate is still increasing, that is the recipe for a minor capitulation. We haven't had that yet. Really, we're getting a little bit right now, but in my personal belief, I'm still a little bit hesitant to enter short because of the reasons that I've said, but I am looking for that nice little retest for a potential entry, as we talked about, within the smaller term time frames. But yeah, it's going to be the more or less the chart of Bitcoin, my view on it, and my take on what could potentially go down in the next couple days here. Let's quickly look at the Bitcoin dominance. It has been consolidating around 67, 68 for a while. It's, in my opinion, broken out of a price action pattern that is an expanding price action pattern with a very significant ascending zone connecting the higher lows. So it is looking bullish for the Bitcoin dominance in my personal view, which means that it would be a time to start to allocate capital kind of away from altcoins into Bitcoin. I think that the massive altcoin, huge bull kind of phase for the altcoins is not here yet. I think that if we do break this ascending zone in time, we will have that phase like we saw in 2017. Basically, the entire year of 2017 was a massive capitulation in the dominance for Bitcoin. It was at like 95, 96 before 2017. And then at the end of 2018, it was at 36%. So when altcoins run, altcoins can take a huge chunk of the Bitcoin dominance. But as of right now, the Bitcoin dominance is still climbing back up. So my personal belief, Bitcoin is where not more of the price appreciation is, but where the large majority of larger capital will be going into. If you are investing $1 million plus, you're not going to be trading or investing in the 35th cryptocurrency, I don't think, in my personal view, especially if you're not super aware of the space. You're going to be investing into already kind of vetted cryptos that have stood the test of time in the crypto world, which would be like 10 years for Bitcoin. You're not really going to get anything longer than Ethereum for validity, really. So those are the two that most people are going to be sticking with in my personal belief. And then when the true parabolic phase 2017 type of bull run does commence, I think we will have another move to the downside where the altcoins will absolutely demolish the BTC dominance. But in the short term, I think Bitcoin dominance is still on the upside, where Bitcoin is taking the large majority of the market cap compared to the rest of the alts. All right, now let's look at some of the alts here. I don't really have much else to add in terms of BTC. Let's go back just to the inverse chart, just because I actually really like looking at the inverse chart here. Let's go like this. And now we're going to be looking at some alts. But first, what I want to be looking at is the comparison versus different alts to Bitcoin. So instead of comparing things to US Tether, like we see in these different pairs, we see that we are comparing an alt to the US Tether, which is basically a stable coin that is pegged to the US dollar. But when we're comparing things to Bitcoin, we're assessing how strong that alt is compared to Bitcoin, which is kind of the king of the entire crypto market. So let's take a quick look and see the relative strength of altcoins compared to Bitcoin when we kind of do our rounds here. First, we're going to look at Ethereum. Not really going to do a whole lot of TA, but just quickly scanning how the market structure looks, kind of looking at the large term time frame. So first things first, obviously, if we're actually taking a look at a daily, it's extremely squished, meaning that we're not even close to kind of 2017, 2018 area, and we are continuously making lower highs. So in terms of the relative strength, Ethereum is much weaker compared to Bitcoin, but that makes sense. But in a relative strength, comparing alts to different alts within the market will identify that at the very end. But we do see on the smaller time frame, on the macro chart, obviously Ethereum looks a lot weaker compared to Bitcoin, but on the smaller term time frame, we do see that we are making a nice stable low, following a series of slow higher lows, which is pretty good. It does look like it is basing, which is nice to see. If it breaks this key level of support, maybe somewhere around there, I would be a little bit worried for a potential another move down. Kind of like here, we could even draw a nice little projection zone, just creating that support. And if we break below this zone, I'd be a little bit worried that Ethereum is going to drop pretty significantly because of the Bitcoin dominance, as well as kind of the fact that Bitcoin's taking the large majority of the market cap as of right now. It's going up, so a little bit worrying if it goes below that. But as long as we're kind of staying in that nice basing formation, and then we maybe even potentially break this zone, which is a very significant zone, 0.0266. That would be a potential where we are going to create a level of a base, and then we could make a potential move up where Ethereum is appreciating more than BTC. But right now, it doesn't look bad. Definitely not something that is really giving me any interest to look at Ethereum more than Bitcoin. Overall, Bitcoin looks like it's performing much better than Ethereum when compared to another. Let's go to another one. Let's actually look at Link. So Link BTC. And Link's actually one that looks pretty strong compared to some of the other alts that we're going to be looking at. We see a strong series of higher highs and higher lows, and overall, relatively speaking, Link is looking pretty good compared to Bitcoin. In my opinion, Link's one of the few alts that look like they are doing pretty well compared to the king, which is Bitcoin. Let's look at another one. BNB compared with Bitcoin. Binance Coin is one of my favorites because it is the token of Binance, the most liquid, most used cryptocurrency exchange around the globe. I absolutely love Binance, so it's a great coin for me personally because it's kind of like investing in the exchange itself, because they burn coins to kind of create it in a structure that sounds similar to actually purchasing a share, although it's not obviously, but that's kind of the idea that they want to create for purchasing BNB. So if we look at BNB, obviously it is kind of looking like it's basing right here where you see a low, and it is holding, which is nice, but it is looking like it's expanding. If we just create a nice little horizontal zone right around there, you see that major level right here. So it does look like it's expanding, which isn't great, but overall it does look like it is holding a nice level of support, although it doesn't look as bullish as Link, because on Link you see a strong level of higher highs and higher lows, although on BNB it looks like it's definitely making lower lows. It's able to hold a key level of supply, so it's not looking nearly as bullish as Link. So overall, from the ones that we've seen, Link's definitely the best. And the last one we're going to do is XRP compared with BTC, which in my opinion looks by far the weakest of the bunch. So let's look at the peak here. From the peak, you're looking at 90% decimation in the relative strength of XRP compared to Bitcoin. And this is just an extremely weak looking chart here. We see that XRP is gaining very, very little amount of strength or a little amount of volume in any sort of movement to the upside. It's getting absolutely crushed by Bitcoin in terms of the relative strength. So when you're looking at different alts to short, definitely consider relative strength, looking at different alts and trying to find which one may have the weakest amount of buyers in the market. And from this analysis, in my personal view, XRP does look like it has the weakest amount of relative strength compared to Bitcoin from the different assets, from the different alts that we are looking at. So now let's look at the same alts compared to the US Tether, which is the tethered coin that is kind of, what's it called? Stable like the US dollar. It is pegged to the US dollar. That's the word I'm looking for, pegged. All right, first things first, let's look at Ethereum. Remember the relative strength that we're looking at. Ethereum wasn't so bad, so we're still holding this nice ascending level of support. The main thing we're looking at is BTC for any entries. In my personal view, that's just what I'm looking for, so I'm not really looking at Ethereum just yet significantly, but we do see that it's still holding a series of higher lows. Definitely still too early to short in my personal view, but we do see a nice potential level that if we break, which is around 185, if we break that zone, high potential that we could be seeing a move to the downside. But overall, we're seeing it hold pretty well. BNB is the one that also held decent, not as good as Link. Link will be the next one that we're looking at. BNB is holding a nice level of resistance at around 1715. We are holding our major level of support, which is around 1520, which is right around here. So my personal view, I think we are just in a consolidation phase, and if we start to see a break of the $15 zone as a support, that would be a potential level where we are looking to short the market. Kind of something like we saw right here. Let's just zoom out a little bit more. BNB kind of has these convex moves to the upside when it looks like it could sell off, and then concave moves that looks like it's going to be a parabolic move. And I think this is a really good representation of it. This, in my opinion, looks like it's a convex where the higher highs are getting less high, where you see from this high to this high, it's a pretty substantial move. From this high to this high, it's less substantial. And then from this high to this high, it's very, very limited. And then compared to here, you get this high to this high, which is smaller. You get this high to this high, which is a lot bigger. And then this high to this high, which is even bigger. And then this high to this high, which is even bigger. So you're getting different market structures. It might take a little bit of time for you to understand how that looks like if you don't really nitpick what price action looks like. But in my personal view, this structure, it looks a lot more convex, where it's like a bulging kind of bubble, whereas this looks concave, where it looks like an on-ramp to the rocket that's going to take you to the moon. Very, very different sort of market structures. And in my opinion, this definitely looks convex, where you get higher highs, which are getting less high. Pretty higher high there, less higher high there, less higher high there, less higher high there, and you're getting a bubbling of the top in my personal view. Or if you flipped it around, it would be a nice base forming at the top, where you get a nice base like this, where you get a nice base, and then you see these lower highs, and then you get some level of a horizontal zone, and once it breaks that zone, you're looking for a major move to the downside. So that's my personal view of BNB, and the major zone, the major horizontal zone that I'm potentially looking for, is we can see it was well respected around $14.50 to $15. Around $15, let's say, is a key level of support that I'm looking for BNB. The final one we're going to be looking at is XRP. That is the one that looked the weakest compared to BTC. And in my opinion, this moved the furthest to the downside compared to all the other alts, because let's say Link looked the strongest compared to BTC in relative strength. And we can see that Link held up the best in that BTC move to the downside. So when Bitcoin moves to the downside, a lot of these alts will move to the downside as well, because Bitcoin is the king asset in the crypto space. And then you see, because Link had higher relative strength to Bitcoin compared to different altcoins, Link didn't move nearly as much. It didn't have nearly as much sell pressure to push the price down compared to something like BNB, which had a little bit more. Ethereum had a little bit more, but XRP had a significant move to the downside compared to some of these other alts. So relative strength does provide some level of analysis when you are trying to look at the same asset class, but identify which trades might be better for certain assets compared to the other when you're trading in the same asset class. So my personal belief, XRP is going to be a better short because it has less relative value compared to BTC in relation to different alts that we are looking at that provide high liquidity, that provide low spread, that you're still actually able to short. So that's my more fundamental analysis in terms of which alts are weak versus strong. And XRP is definitely looking weak in my personal view. So on the large time frame for XRP, we got a nice wedge that did break to the downside. This was, I guess you could call it a triangle, or not a triangle, a wedge or a channel, I should say, which we got a little channel right there. But then you can also create some level of a wedge where it did have a blow off top, and it was holding the previous resistance as a new level of support for a little while. But now what do we see, right? Let's just take off this. We don't really need that, and we don't really need that zone because we got a line. All right, so what do we see right now? In my opinion, we're seeing quite a bit of a sell-off where sellers are definitely taking charge in the market. We got this ascending zone that broke to the downside extremely aggressively. We got a nice squeeze here where we got an ascending zone to break back to the downside with that little spill right here. And we could see, in my opinion, another little pullback retesting this resistance that got rejected with the anchor point right here. And then we got another point right here. And then we got a third point right here. So it's a pretty well-respected zone all around. And we got to move back down below that zone. I think we could retest this key zone yet again because we see this was a key level of support, key level of resistance, 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 resistance. Support could be a new level of resistance in confluence with this descending zone. And then we're going to have a nice squeeze here where it's going to be a descending triangle pattern where you have series of lower highs squeezing along a horizontal level of support. Market has to make a decision. I think if we do break to the downside, we could see a significant sell-off. That would be a pretty good risk-reward situation for a trader to be in if the market tends to continue to the downside. So that's gonna be my option for Ethereum for a short. If it was a long, you'd need to see the price break above this key level of resistance. It'd be ideal if we tested this previous resistance right here as a new level of support in confluence with this horizontal level of support as well, which would be right here. That would be an ideal place to see the price hold to create that move to the upside. So got a couple options. My bias is going to be a little bit more bearish on XRP, but hey, I'll let the price action speak for itself. Ethereum, like I said, 189. Link, I don't really see a pattern that I'd like to trade on Link in my personal belief. We had an expanding pattern here that was with two trend lines, one with a higher high, with another one with some lower highs. It was expanding. I think we could draw another trend line just kind of connecting the higher lows that we are seeing, but I don't really see a pattern that I have too much of an edge trading, to be completely honest. Like this would be the structure that I currently see right now, is an expanding, kind of expanding wedge, which is just kind of creating more volatility as it moves up. And it's just a lot of chop. I don't really see something that I want to trade on Link right now, but it's just something that we're keeping in the back of our minds is Link has a higher relative strength compared to something like XRP. But yeah, that's going to be my analysis. Not a whole lot to talk about on Link because I just don't really see anything that I want to trade. But if we are looking on the long-term time frame, we do see that this major level of $3 is a key structural zone, as we can see right here. And then we got a major level of support also at around $1.75 as well. But I don't really see anything that I like trading, so I'm not really going to be doing anything for Link right now. So that's basically analysis. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We definitely touched on BTC pretty extensively, and then we dove into different alts as well as did some relative strength analysis, which in my opinion is pretty important as well. So thank you very much for watching. If you had any questions, comments, or things that you'd like to add on, things that you had questions about that we went over that you'd like to know more on, definitely don't hesitate to comment in the question section below, and we'll be sure to help you out. If you found this video educational, informative, entertaining, anything kind of relating to do with that, it'd be great if you subscribe to our channel. It helps us out greatly, and then you'll be able to get more content like this for free. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, have a good one, traders.